Hello everybody, good afternoon and welcome to the United Stand. I'm Mark Goldbridge and this is your latest Manchester United news as Marcus Rashford faces what I think is actually unfair pressure and attention, not just from Manchester United fans but the wider media now trying to jump on him as well. We also had a story this morning which I pretty much predicted was going to happen. Remember Ole Gunnar Solskjaer did his interview last week. I felt that Solskjaer's interview last week was very unfair. I have got stronger words, but I felt it was unfair because it was about deflection. It was about players that, didn't want to work hard, that, that were toxic. But he was the manager and it was his job to out those players and deal with those players, which is what Ten Hag is having to do now. It felt like Solskjaer's interview last week. Many people described it as explosive and honest. Why is he waiting 2 years to do it? Because his non-disclosure order has come to an end that he signed with the club. And why is he throwing players under the bus when he was the manager and it was his job to sort that out? This is a manager at half-time against Watford said, I think I'm going to get the sack. That's it, lads. I mean, I don't have a lot of time for Solskjaer as a coach. I have a lot of time for him as a person, as a legend, as a player. And I didn't like what he said, that I offered the captaincy to two players and I was very disappointed that they turned it down because I knew it would cause what's happened now. And effectively, the Sun have put it out this morning that those two players were Paul Pogba and Marcus Rashford. Well, in relation to Paul Pogba, it doesn't really matter because Paul Pogba doesn't play for Manchester United anymore. He's been booed, slated and, criticised for years. Marcus Rashford is currently a Man United player. And now there's a story out there that he turned down the Man United captaincy. On top of the fact that he's being targeted for being lazy, having a bad attitude, not scoring goals, having bad performances. And it just feels to me like I can take it on board that Rashford's attitude against Bayern didn't look great and he's not playing particularly well. But I still stand by what I've always said. Really like him as a player. Still think he's a massively important player for us. Not his fault Ten Hag won't sub him off for Garnacho, which I think does need to happen. But on the captaincy thing, can I just say, if Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had appointed Marcus Rashford as captain, every single one of us would have said it's too soon and it's ridiculous. So if it was Marcus Rashford, the Sun are saying Rashford was offered the captaincy and said no because he felt it was too soon. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has said, I was really disappointed in those players. Can I just say, I'm 100% behind Marcus Rashford not taking the captaincy because he felt it was too soon. What is wrong with that? What is wrong with that? What is wrong with saying, I'm honoured to be offered it, but I don't think I'm ready for it? I actually think it would... If there's any element of truth in that, I think Rashford being offered the captaincy, what would have been at least 3 years ago, was ridiculous. I wouldn't offer him the captaincy now. I don't think he is a captain. I don't think he's ready to be captain even now at 25. And apparently it was offered to him at 22. So look, I think we've got to be very careful about the pile-on with Marcus Rashford. Also, let me just say, last night it's come out that there was a car crash after the game last night involving Marcus Rashford. And thank God, he and the other driver have not been harmed. The police attended, no injuries, just shook up. And this is the danger that, any human being can have. So look, there is a human element to this. Thank God Marcus Rashford or the other person involved weren't seriously injured. Obviously, I'm sure that was quite a shock for Rashford. And I think, look, you know what? I said this on Friday night. We're Manchester United. We need to get behind this manager and get behind those players that are behind the manager. And Ten Hag and Rashford have a very good relationship. I mean, I've even seen people over the weekend trying to insinuate that Rashford's got power over Ten Hag and he can't be dropped and he can't be subbed. And I'm like, and Rashford might be the leak. And I'm like, look, Rashford's got really good people around him who protect him. He writes books. He's a brand onto himself. And I'm sure if United and Ten Hag did decide that they had a problem with Rashford, that would be a very interesting dynamic as to how that would resolve itself. But that's not happening. Rashford is not the leak. He's not the toxic person. The relationship with Ten Hag in his interview before he'd even met Rashford said, I'll make Rashford a really important player for this club. Like, he really values him. Rashford respects Ten Hag. We shouldn't be trying to break that up. What we should be looking at is how we get the best out of Rashford, because he hasn't scored many goals in his last 20 odd games and he's not playing particularly well at the moment. And what I think he needs is support, and what I think he needs is confidence. And I think that last night was a really crappy performance but it reminded me so much of last season when we lost to Brentford and Brighton at home, and then we went and got those 2 shitty wins away to Southampton and Leicester, 1-0. And last night reminded me of that. And remember, Southampton and Leicester got relegated, and maybe Burnley will get relegated. So we can't, and the teams that we sent to Southampton and Leicester and grounded out a 1-0 win, and they were very similar performances. You look back to Southampton Leicester at the start of last season, 1-0, ground it out, needed the win, didn't play particularly well. And I tell you what, in both those games, we had a much better 11 available than we did last night. That team would get relegated last night if it had to play 38 games. Imagine the team that's got Mabry, McTominay and Casemiro and Johnny Evans and Lindelof and Reguilon and Delo. That's going to get relegated across the season. So I think last night was a massive, massive, massive boost for a team that's on its knees, a manager that's getting it always, and they've got to win. And you look at our next three Premier League games. We've got Crystal Palace at home, Brentford at home, Sheffield United away. There's absolutely no reason with Old Trafford support and then Sheffield United away. We should take 9 points from our next 3 games. And I tell you what, if we do, that league table's going to look a lot better. I mean, it already looks a bit better in the top half at least. But if we take 9 points from our next 3 games, we'll be in a much better position and we'll be exactly where I said we'll be. Despite the 3 losses this season, I still think 4th place is still massively up for grabs, and it can be ours, and we can still rescue this season if we can work through the injuries. Not sure if Rashford's Erik ten Hag's favourite. That was in the job description to make Rashford a star again. He is the biggest brand the club have, says Zion. Look, Rashford last season was sensational. He scored a lot of goals. I think he is a player. And look, I was looking at the stats last night, and I don't know whether anybody else has looked at this. Shots last night, he had 3. None of them were on target. Rasmus had 2. None of them were on target. If you think back to the Brighton game last week, I think he had 10 shots and 75% of them were off target. So it just shows you last night, the attackers, that I think Rashford and Højlund had 5 shots combined, whereas last week it was into double figures. So it was slim pickings last night. The goal that won us the game was absolutely world class. And apart from Johnny Evans' disallowed goal, we didn't create. We played badly last night. I mean, I'm not going to be a hypocrite here. When you win badly, especially when you're in a bad place and keep a clean sheet, it's fantastic. And we played badly last night. Some people are hyping up Mabry's performance. Even Ten Hag was. I don't think Mabry's actual performance. If you take away, he's from the youth, everybody likes him, and he's young, and it was some 26-year-old on loan from Burnley playing for Man United in that position, you'd have said it was okay. But, in the circumstances, people have hyped it up. McTominay was absolutely rubbish. Johnny Evans was the best defender we had on the pitch. There's not a lot to work with going forward. Last night was about a result. And I can't understand why you've got people ringing up on the radio, you've got people writing articles with their blue ticks, and they're actually analysing that performance last night. And I'm like, I've moved on. I look at the table, I look at the result, 3 points. Bonus points for Bruno on Fantasy Premier League. A clean sheet for Anna on Fantasy Premier League. We move on to the next game. I don't see anything from that game that massively concerns me. But you know what really stood out for me for Rashford last night? His average pass length was 14.3 metres. He played 32 passes in the game and 26 of them were accurate. So he had a pass accuracy of well over 80%. And look, he didn't really have any shots, and he didn't really get a chance to dribble. But yeah, I'd have took him off last night. The one thing we cannot get, and the one thing we never get, and the one thing that would be really interesting is I would love to see the running stats. And it's really difficult to get hold of the running stats, and it always has been. I'd love to know the running stats of the players yesterday, because I think that is where you really get a glimpse of who's putting in the hard yards, and we don't have that. But I just think that in relation to Rashford, it feels like he's being scapegoated a little bit at the moment. He's certainly under pressure and he's certainly under fire. And we've got to be really careful about that, because if you think about Alan Shearer or you think about Erling Haaland or any striker, when they're going through a barren spell and they're not scoring, they start to shoot more because they feel they need to score. And what we definitely do not want with Rashford is him shooting more because he's feeling like he has to score. That's one of the criticisms of Rashford. He doesn't pass enough and he shoots too often. So I just think we need to calm down here. I think Rashford needs to calm down. Ten Hag needs to do his job and the fan base needs to calm down. We don't need to be scapegoating anybody at the moment. We've been through a bad week. We've been through a bad month. We've been through a bad summer. We've had some bad results. We've had some bad luck off the pitch in relation to non-footballing matters. And we really don't need to be scapegoating Rashford. I'll tell you what, if we got up tomorrow morning and someone said Rashford's broke his leg and he's out for 3 months, I'd be terrified. That's how important I think he is. Yes, I agree Ten Hag should be taking him off. I think that's for his own protection. As I said last night, we've just played 3 games in a week, and Marcus Rashford and Bruno Fernandes have both played nearly every minute in 3 games. We've got an injury crisis where people are fatigued and, dropping like flies, and we're overplaying 2 of our best players. I think there needs to be rotation. I think Ten Hag is over-reliant on his favouritism of those 2 players. I think you've got players like Pellistri, Martial and Garnacho are more than capable of coming into the team. Maybe Sancho apologises. He's another option. But how can they play if you never take those players off? That's the only thing I would say. And I said that last night. My only criticism would be, I think Ten Hag has to take Rashford off sometimes. I think he also has to take Bruno off sometimes, especially when Mason Mount's fit and you've got Christian Eriksen. So I think there needs to be more rotation between Bruno and Rashford because they don't always play well every minute of every game. But going in on these players, it's not the time. We are in a position, I and many of the older fans will recognise, we're in a siege position here. There will be, there'll be so many recycle bins full up on Word this morning from journalists and other haters who'd wrote articles and tweets about Ten Hag and it's time to go, ramping the pressure up because we lose to Burnley. And they'll have had to put them in their recycle bin and ignore them. And that makes me smile on a Sunday morning. That makes me really happy that they'll be so pissed off. They'll have had all these articles written about leaks and it's time to go for Ten Hag. It's the beginning of the end. They'll be sharpening their knives. And the fact that we won, and we won scrappy, will piss them off even more. So, look, maybe I'm in the minority. Maybe I'm in the majority. Maybe it's 50-50. But right here, right now, I can only say I'm firmly behind Rashford. I'm firmly behind Bruno. I'm firmly behind all those players. I mean, even Johnny Evans surprised me last night. Johnny Evans is a really likeable guy, but at 35, I still think he's an accident waiting to happen. But against the Burnley side that was toothless, that pass to Bruno is absolutely fantastic. Bregwell playing when he's ill. I don't think he's that good defensively. Mabry, I don't think he played that well, but he's a young lad thrown into the situation. McTominay was absolute crap, but he was still part of the team. At the end of the day, those players went out and they got us a win last night, and that's all that matters. And we're starting in the basement. Like, we've had a really bad week of results, and we're starting in the basement with a 1-0 win against a Burnley side that's not that good. But we need to get behind the team. We need to get behind this manager. And I think we've got this habit over the last 10 years, and I'm guilty of it as well. We've had this habit over the last 10 years of Glazer issues and bad running of the club. We've had this habit of, scapegoating and identifying players. And I think there's plenty of players to scapegoat at the moment. I think Sancho needs to sort himself out. I thought that tweet was massively disrespectful. I think McTominay should have gone, and I think his performances in the last week, he's very lucky to have played yesterday. Maguire, I think, needs to go. Donny, I think, needs to go. But the players that are part of the future, I think you've got to get behind them. And I think, Marcus Rashford is definitely going to start banging goals in. He's a player that, admittedly, I did say when he was in a hot run last season, I think he's potentially a Ballon d'Or winner. That looks ridiculous now. But I think in relation to Marcus Rashford, is he overhyped a little bit? Yes. Yeah, and he's probably overhyped by the people around him, and he's probably overhyped by people at Man United, and he's probably overhyped by certain fans, and he's probably overhyped by people within Man United, and he's probably been overhyped by people like myself. I think in reality, Marcus Rashford on his day is a very, very, very top-class player. But I don't think he's going to win a Ballon d'Or, because to win a Ballon d'Or, I think you've got to be consistent, week in, week out. What Marcus Rashford clearly is a player that can go through a bad run and then can go through a run where he looks absolutely unstoppable. We've seen it before. I think we saw it about 3 years ago when it was like November or December time. He was absolutely unplayable. We saw him for a period of time last year where he was absolutely unplayable. But probably from about April, at the end of last season, to now, he's going through a bit of a bad patch. But I'm absolutely convinced he'll go through one. A good one. Daniel says, are you doing any watch-alongs today? I am, mate. I'm doing the North London Derby at 2 o'clock. I'm looking forward to that, actually. We'll be live on That's Football for that. But look, if you've tuned in a little bit late, obviously we know Solskjaer put out an article last week, which very much was about deflection. And he said that he'd offered the captaincy to 2 players who'd rejected it, and that really disappointed him. The Sun have said it was Paul Pogba and Marcus Rashford. Paul Pogba apparently rejected it because he said he was leaving the club and he didn't want it, which you can sort of respect. And then Marcus Rashford apparently rejected it because he said he wasn't ready for it. I think Solskjaer's a bit naughty there, to be honest with you. I think that's really naughty because he has been given 2 very legitimate reasons why 2 people didn't want to manage Manchester United. And whilst I sit here, and Solskjaer probably sat there and went, you're being given one of the biggest jobs in football and you're saying you're turning it down, I think actually both players probably made the right decision for the club instead of being selfish. I mean, Harry Maguire taking the captaincy, he gobbled it up, didn't he? He gobbled it up like a cheesecake. Was it the right thing for Harry Maguire to do? I don't think it was. I don't think it was. Harry Maguire had only just been at the club for 3 months. I think he should have said, I'm privileged, but I've only been here for 3 months, Gaffer. I need to establish myself as a centre-back before I start being the leader. I probably would have done the same thing Maguire did, if I'm being honest. I probably would have took it. But from Rashford's point of view, to turn it down, I think he was absolutely correct. And the reason he turned it down, apparently, was because it was too soon. And I'll tell you what, if Marcus Rashford had been given the captaincy 3 years ago, I'd have gone mad. If Marcus Rashford was given the captaincy now, I'd say, why? He is a leader in the sense that he's a star player, but he's not a leader in the way that he plays the game. Like, I think Rashford... frustration is very visible at times. His head drops. He doesn't track back. So I don't think he's captain material. And I would question... in fact, I would bounce it back to Solskjaer and I say, why were you offering it to Marcus Rashford in the first place? And this is why you weren't very good at the job. Because there's absolutely no way Marcus Rashford should have been offered the captaincy 3 years ago. And to be honest with you, applause to Marcus Rashford for turning it down and saying he wasn't ready for it. So I'd flip that back on Solskjaer and say... you know, you might be disappointed he didn't take it, but your judgment was way off, mate, and he's absolutely right to turn it down. Because I don't think anybody... in fact, let's do a poll. I don't think anybody would say that Marcus Rashford should be captain of Manchester United. Let's run it. Should Rashford be captain? And considering we're saying this today, not 3 years ago... I just think, as I said, I think it's a bit naughty. It's a bit like, oh, you know, I was manager of Man United. It didn't go really well, but I offered the captaincy to people and they turned it down. And the way the article came out, it was almost like these leaders were saying, no, shit on Man United. I don't want the job. Whereas actually, if it was Rashford, he's saying, you know, I don't feel I'm ready for this job yet. And I don't think he was. I really, really don't think he was. And I don't think he should have been offered it in the first place. Ollie's making it worse to try and save his face, says Jermaine. But I knew this last week when it came out. When you say, I don't want to name the players, but I offered it to 2 players and they turned it down, you know straight away that fans can't deal with that. It's like the Luckhurst article yesterday, isn't it? You know, or the other day, dressing room sources are turning against Erik ten Hag. Well, it backfired badly, but you want to know who the sources are. And when you hear that 2 players turned the captaincy down, you want to know who they are. And then when it comes out, you're sort of like, well, actually, I agree with them turning it down. There is no story there. It's a bad story. Who would you have given it to, says Robert McCormack. 3 years ago, well, I think, to be honest with you, I'm trying to think. Well, there's a few. David De Gea. I'd have given it to David De Gea, actually, at that time. David De Gea would have been a good one. Matic was still there. Who else? Probably not Luke Shaw at that time. Juan Mata was there. I can't remember who was here 3 years ago that I would have given it to, but certainly you could have given it to Bruno if Bruno was there. You could have given it to Bruno. But offering it to Rashford was bloody ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I don't know what that was all about. A few people talking about Marcus Rashford crashing his car last night, which he did. Thankfully, he's well. Just shook up and, in real life terms, absolutely Relieved that that's the case. Hi Mark, I think you need to watch back Hannibal's performance last night. He had a great game for his first start, I believe, says podcast series. Man, I don't need to watch it back actually. I really actually do not. I'm glad that you want to, climb up his arse and say it was a great performance, but I actually don't think it was. I think it was an average performance. I thought it was average. I thought he was thrown into a situation, and I like Mabry, but I think he was thrown into a situation that was a difficult situation, and I think he came out of it. I can see why people said he played really well because it was a difficult situation. But are we judging people on? Are we actually judging their performance, or are we just saying, "Oh my God, he was thrown into a position and he didn't drown"? I don't think he had many touches on the ball. I didn't really notice him massively in the game. I genuinely don't think we played well. So did Mabry stand out? I don't think Bruno played well. Can I just say, this is not, and I don't do that. I always back the youth, and I like Mabry and I like Garnacho, and I've stuck up for those players who've been Chong and in the past who've been slated on social media, and I say they're young players, you shouldn't be slating them. All I'm saying is I don't think Mabry had a great game. I don't think he had a good game. I think he had an average game. Some people thought he had a shit game. I certainly don't think that. I don't think Bruno deserved man of the match. I'm a massive fan of Bruno. Don't think he played that well. Scored a worldie, but I'm not somebody that goes, you scored a worldie, let's forget the other 90 minutes of the game. I don't think Bruno's overall game was that good. In fact, I think Mabry and Bruno had the same game. I think there was a lot of work, but I don't think there was a lot of output, and I don't think they particularly got hold of the game at all. I think Burnley had 70% possession. So the midfield, Casemiro was the one that I think played well because he was very, very busy. I think Højlund and Rashford were not in the game. I don't think Bruno, Mabry and McTominay were particularly in the game. I think McTominay was dreadful. Mabry and Bruno were a bit better. Johnny Evans had a good game. Lindelof was okay. Delo was okay. Reguilon was okay. And Arna was okay. And Casemiro played quite well. When you look at it, we've done very, 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 very well to get a win because overall the performance wasn't great. But you take those because the win is what we needed and the goal was absolutely world class. Will the players work as hard as they should if they see there's no chance that Erik ten Hag is subbing off Rashford or Bruno for them? That's my issue. Well, A11, I firmly back Rashford. I think he's a fantastic player who's out of form. I firmly back Bruno. I think he's a fantastic player who can have games like last night. But they both can have games like last night where they don't play that well and then they score an absolute worldie. But we need to get behind these players. Maybe Mabry's going to play a lot more games now. He's shown to me that he's better than Scott McTominay, so maybe he deserves to play more games. On the other hand, maybe he'll never play again. I thought Pellistri was robbed last night. I thought he played brilliantly against Bayern Munich. A very difficult game. He put a massive shift in, didn't even get a minute against Burnley. He deserves another chance. Mabry deserves another chance based on their performances. And let me just say, Pellistri's performance against Bayern was very similar to Mabry's performance against Burnley. They weren't standout performances, but for young lads being thrown into situations that are difficult, they didn't let anybody down, and they had, probably 6 out of 10 performances. But we got to get behind this team, and I still think there's people in the fan base at the moment who are just trying to find an angle. Very few, thankfully, are turning on Ten Hag, but a lot are starting to have a pop at Rashford. There'll be others having a pop at others. We're in this together and we've got to work through it together. Mark, United turning down £30 million for McTominay is criminal. Club is a joke. Rashford not working hard enough for the team, says Marcus. And you need to be a certain type of player to be United captain. Rashford just isn't that player. Ollie again proving why he just isn't top quality manager, says Louis. Well, I agree with Louis. I actually think that Solskjaer article is starting to fall apart. It really comes across as a PR piece for Solskjaer to deflect the blame from the fact that he was the manager and he oversaw a lot of the shit that we're still trying to work out. A lot of the problems that Ten Hag is facing were brought on by Solskjaer. Whether it's McTominay, Maguire, Sancho, Ollie created those problems if they are problems. And saying that I don't want to name the names, but 2 people turned down the captaincy is really naive or sly. Because if we now know the reasons and the players, I agree with both reasons. I agree with why Rashford turned it down, because I don't think he was ready for it, to be honest with you. We have got an 8 o'clock show tonight, yes. You need to be... I've done that one as well. TJC says, if you put Eriksen in that midfield instead of Mabry, we probably would have lost the game. I'd love to see Eriksen play as in the Mabry role. Eriksen plays in the McTominay role. I would love to see Eriksen play in the Cam role. But you know, podcast is, I think, Maybury's best #1 fan. We're gonna agree to disagree, mate, and I can't be bothered to talk about something that really isn't that important and is probably going to send everybody to sleep. The bottom line is we got a result last night. Maybury did a good job for the team, but overall the team was crap, and we won, and that's all that matters. There's nobody watching that game back last night getting excited. It was a hard watch. But with the 3 points are what matters. And I'm looking forward to the game on Tuesday against Crystal Palace. You've got to rotate in that game. You know, it's a very quick turnaround. And then we've got Saturday afternoon against Palace in the league. You don't want to give Palace too much away because the league, I don't even care. Can I just say, I don't care if we get knocked out of the Carabao Cup. Ten Hag will. He's going to take it really seriously, the same that Pep does. But he's got to rotate. Martial's got to start. Palistri's got to start. Garnacho's got to start. You know, Eriksen's got to start. You've got to rotate. I mean, I don't really want to see Rashford starting on Tuesday, but I bet he will. I don't really want to see Bruno starting, but I bet he will. Ten Hag, and I back him to the hilt, but the only thing I would say about Ten Hag is don't do what Ollie did. Like, don't start playing Bruno and Rashford into the ground because they definitely aren't playing very well at the moment, and they definitely do need a rest. And they'll just play for you, you know. Especially Bruno, he'll play and play and play, but they need a rest. And also, more importantly, what's the point in having Palistri, Garnacho, Martial, Eriksen if you're not going to use them? And he needs to use them on Tuesday night. Bruno had a bad game, says Mandy. Eric played him on the right. Surprise, surprise. Should stay at number 10. He is our creator. I agree. Anyway, I'm going to go and get myself something to eat. On a positive end to the show, I just for everybody who knows Seb, my son, he played his second competitive game today and he scored a goal, which is you know, a great feeling. So I'm really proud of him for that. Make sure you smash a like on the video. I'm back at 8 o'clock tonight, and I'm going to be on That's Football in just over an hour for the North London derby, which I'm really looking forward to. So tune in for that on That's Football. I'll see you back at 8 o'clock. Stay positive. Stay behind the team that cares. Stay behind the manager. It's going to be a long, hard slog, but we're moving in the right direction. And most importantly of all those people that are trying to bring our manager down are having to shut up today and go on a long, cold walk in the rain. You haters. Speak to you all in a bit. Take care.